This is America, a nation home to approximately 340 million people, spanning a vast area exceeding 9.8 million square kilometers. This makes the United States the third largest country on Earth. When we compare America to Europe, you'll find it stretches across the entire continent, from its westernmost to its easternmost points. It effectively controls about 90% of Europe's total landmass. The distance from its northernmost to its southernmost point is far greater than the distance from Norway all the way to India. Beyond its immense size, America's economy is far larger than you might imagine. The US alone commands over a quarter of the global economy. This means America's economy is roughly equivalent to the combined economies of Europe, Africa, and South America. From a military standpoint, America possesses tremendous military power. It spends approximately 40% of the total global military expenditure on its armed forces. With over 750 military bases worldwide, America maintains control over any military threat it faces, anywhere on Earth. The America we know today, quite literally the most powerful nation in the world, was merely a British colony just about 250 years ago. Before that, it literally had no existence. So the most pressing question now, how did America transform from an unknown land into a nation that effectively rules and controls the entire world? North America and Asia are separated in the north by the Bering Strait. This strait connects the Bering Sea with the Arctic Ocean and is about 82 kilometers wide. However, approximately 11,000 years ago, the continents of Asia and North America were connected by a land bridge known as Beringia. During that time, groups of humans migrated eastward from Asia across this land bridge. These groups then spread throughout North and South America, forming hundreds of nations and tribes. But the land bridge connecting Asia and North America gradually began to disappear. The sea level rose progressively until the bridge vanished completely around 11,000 years ago. At that point, the Bering Strait formed, becoming the dividing line between Asia and North America. This left the populations living east of the Pacific Ocean completely isolated, and they remained unknown to the rest of the world for thousands of years. In the 15th century, the great European powers relied on trade with India. However, the problem was that the trade routes connecting them to India were controlled by Muslims, who were considered adversaries by European nations at the time. This made Europeans feel threatened, leading them to seek an alternative route to India, one that bypassed Muslim-controlled territories. During this period, the idea of the Earth being spherical began to spread widely. This inspired the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus with the idea of discovering a new route connecting Europe to India. Columbus believed that if he sailed west across the Atlantic Ocean, he would eventually reach India. Columbus, at that time, needed financial support. He presented his idea to the King of Portugal, but it was rejected. He then turned to the Spanish, who were in competition with the Portuguese. Spain eventually agreed to provide full support for Columbus's voyage. 3 ships departed from Spain on August 3rd, 1492, heading west into the unknown. They crossed the Atlantic Ocean, eventually reaching the Bahamas and later Cuba in North America. Columbus was ecstatic, believing he had finally found a new route connecting Europe to India. At that time, the indigenous population living in these lands numbered between 50 and 100 million people. However, Columbus and the Europeans who followed him would cause the death of approximately 90% of these inhabitants within a century and a half. The indigenous people were very simple, to the extent that Columbus considered them childlike. As a result, Columbus forced them to extract gold and work on farms for his benefit. Simultaneously, he began taking slaves from them and sending them to Spain. Spain and Portugal began sending more expeditions to the newly discovered lands by Columbus. The Italian navigator Amerigo Vespucci reached the region in 1507. It was then discovered that these lands were not India at all, but an entirely new continent, unknown to anyone. From that moment, these lands became known as America, named after Amerigo Vespucci. The major European powers began to turn their attention towards this new world, brimming with treasures and natural resources. The territories of North and South America were subsequently divided among Spain, Portugal, Britain, and France. Russia also gained control of northwestern North America after crossing the Pacific Ocean. In the early 17th century, Britain began establishing its colonies in the New World. The Virginia colony was founded, becoming the first British colony there. Britain continued to establish new colonies until their number reached 13. During that period, the population in Europe suffered greatly from economic crises, unemployment, and religious persecution. Consequently, large numbers of people decided to leave Europe and immigrate to America to start new lives. The population of the British colonies eventually reached about 1.5 million people. The northern regions then came to rely on fishing and trade, while the southern regions heavily depended on agriculture. Over time, agricultural landowners gained control of larger areas and became wealthy, purchasing slaves from Africa to work their lands. The population of the 13 colonies had reached approximately 2.5 million. The colonial economy grew significantly, with its output comprising 40% of the entire British Empire's gross domestic product. Mountains formed a natural border between British and French territories, separating their respective colonies. Despite this, both Britain and France sought to expand, leading to intense competition for land control. A major war erupted between Britain and France in 1756, involving many European nations and known as the 7 Years' War. The war ended with Britain's victory and France's defeat, allowing Britain to ultimately seize control of France's New World territories in North America. At that time, the lands controlled by Britain were inhabited by indigenous peoples known as Native Americans. These indigenous populations rejected British control over their lands and demanded their departure and recognition as an independent nation. Consequently, Britain allowed the indigenous people to live in independent territories, specifically between the mountains in the east and the Mississippi River in the west. However, the settlers' goal was to expand further west and gain control of more land, so they rejected this decision and protested it. Britain, at the time, was burdened by debt from its war with France. As a result, Britain imposed more taxes on the colonists, which further increased tensions between the settlers and the British. This was particularly frustrating for the colonists, as they were paying excessive taxes to the British without having any representation in the British Parliament. Riots and protests by the American settlers began, eventually escalating into clashes with British soldiers. The colonists then decided to boycott British goods, marking a new phase of rebellion against Britain. American settlers looted armories, formed armed militias, and united to declare a union of British colonies against Britain. This ignited the American Revolutionary War against Britain in 1775, with their main objective being liberty or death. On July 4th, 1776, the colonies declared their independence from Britain and established the United States of America. Britain refused to recognize the new nation, so the war continued between the two sides. France, along with Spain, then intervened, deciding to support America against Britain, their primary colonial rival. Ultimately, the new nation triumphed, and Britain finally recognized the United States of America in 1783. At this point, America's territory stretched from the East Coast to the Mississippi River. Florida, located in the South, was ceded by Britain to Spain. The states forming America were semi-independent, each with its own constitution and governor. George Washington, having successfully led the American Revolution, became the first president in American history. The city of Washington was named after him and became the capital of America. America's goal was further westward expansion. To facilitate this, they passed a law stating that any territory with over 600,000 free inhabitants would have the right to establish a state and join the United States. In the West, Spain controlled the Louisiana colony. However, Spain decided to cede Louisiana to France in 1800. At that time, France was engaged in continuous wars with Britain in Europe and feared losing Louisiana. Needing significant funding, France decided 3 years later to sell Louisiana to America for $15 million. This purchase nearly doubled America's size. As years passed, the American dream grew, and their ambitions for expansion intensified. Their primary goal became to expand in all directions and gain complete control over the North American continent. America attempted to expand northward, but clashed with Britain. As a result of this aggression, Britain retaliated by burning Washington, D.C. America then decided to abandon its northern expansion ambitions and focus on expanding south, where Spain controlled Florida. After a series of military operations, Spain finally ceded Florida in 1819, allowing America to control the region, expel the indigenous population, and cause many deaths. In the Mexican state of Texas, the number of American settlers significantly increased. These settlers staged a revolution and ultimately succeeded in declaring their independence from Mexico, establishing the Republic of Texas. They then announced their intention to join America, officially becoming part of the United States. This led to a war between America and Mexico in 1845. The war ended with America's victory, and the US annexed 2 more states from Mexico, New Mexico and California. After the war, America's size grew considerably, and disputes escalated between America and Britain over the Oregon Territory, which was eventually divided between the 2 nations. In the northwestern part of North America, Russia controlled Alaska. However, Russia feared that the region would be invaded by Britain, which was an adversary. Therefore, Russia ultimately decided to sell Alaska to America in 1867 for only $7.2 million. Alaska later became the 49th American state. In 1898, America annexed the Hawaiian Islands in the Pacific Ocean, making Hawaii the last state to join the United States. This completed the size of America as we know it today, officially bringing the number of states to 50. The northern states of America relied on industry and supported the idea of abolishing slavery. The southern states, however, were agricultural and almost entirely dependent on enslaved people. Consequently, these states opposed the idea of abolishing slavery. They declared secession from America and established the Confederate States of America. This initiated a war between the United States in the north and the Confederate States in the south. The war lasted about 4 years and is considered one of the most violent wars in American history. The war ended in May 1865, with the northern states ultimately succeeding in their victory and freeing the enslaved people in the South. In the early 20th century, American industry developed rapidly, and the American economy began to grow at an astonishing rate. America became the world's leading industrial power at that time. This led to an unprecedented increase in immigration to America from all corners of the world, transforming America into the land of opportunity and dreams for anyone considering immigration. In 1914, World War I began in Europe between the Allied powers, including Britain and France, and the Central powers, including Germany. At that time, America remained neutral, but it began selling weapons, food, and raw materials to Europe on credit. Germany attempted to prevent these supplies from reaching Britain, launching attacks on merchant ships heading to Britain, some of which were American vessels. Subsequently, Germany sent a telegram to Mexico, offering an alliance in case America entered the war. However, Britain intercepted this telegram and sent it to America, prompting America to officially declare war. The war ended with the Allied victory, but they became heavily indebted to America. America significantly increased its production to meet the needs of global markets. However, after the war ended, European countries resumed normal production and no longer needed American products. American goods literally found no buyers, marking the beginning of the period known as the Great Depression. During this time, factories laid off workers, unemployment reached approximately 25%, wages fell by about 42%, and the gross domestic product nearly halved. America experienced its worst economic problem of the century. America implemented economic reforms, and the crisis gradually began to recede. World War II began in Europe in 1939 between the Allied powers, including Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, and the Axis powers, including Germany, Italy, and Japan. At the start of the war, America declared neutrality, but the Allied powers began importing almost everything from America. This effectively ended the American crisis, and the American economy revived. America decided to ban the export of oil and steel to Japan to prevent its expansion in the Pacific Ocean. However, Japan retaliated by launching an airstrike on the American state of Hawaii. America then officially declared war on the Allies and began a project to develop the nuclear bomb, eventually delivering 2 nuclear strikes on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. The war concluded with the Allied victory and the surrender of Germany and Japan, ushering in a period of American dominance over the world, while Europe suffered widespread devastation from the war. After the end of World War I and World War II, America fully realized that if it controlled the arms trade, it would not only earn significant profits, but also gain control over the world, having the ultimate say in everything. To legally solidify this American dominance, America supported the establishment of international organizations on its soil, including the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. The most significant decision in American history, which led to America's almost complete global control, came after it convinced the 44 allied nations that won the World War to link their currencies to the US dollar instead of gold. This transformed the dollar from a local currency into an international one. Currently, the dollar accounts for 60% of foreign exchange reserves in central banks worldwide and is used in 88% of global trade transactions. As for weaponry, America is the largest arms exporter and virtually monopolizes the global arms trade. This is why America is currently the most powerful nation on Earth.